The Chicago of the 1920s was a city of violence, corruption, and gang warfare. And at the center of it all was Al Capone, one of the most infamous mobsters in American history. But who were the men who carried out Capone's dirty work? Join us as we dive into the life of one of Capone's loyal soldiers, exploring the rise of organized crime in America and the lengths that these men were willing to go to stay on top. From violent shootouts to speakeasy raids, these gang members were at the forefront of a criminal empire that ruled the streets of Chicago. And while their actions may have been illegal, they have become an integral part of American folklore. Hi, and welcome to True Crime, a channel dedicated to the dark underworld of criminal activity carried out by gangsters, mobsters, cartel leaders, and others. Let's get started. Welcome to the dark and dangerous world of the Black Hands. It all began in the early 1900s when Sicilian and Italian immigrants started various extortion rackets in major cities across the U.S. These outfits eventually converged under the name Black Hands for their distinctive practice of sending threatening letters adorned with menacing black handprints. And it was in this violent underworld that the men who would later become known as the victims of the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre lived their lives. Their leader, Bugs Morin, had recently taken over the Northside Gang after the murder of its previous leaders. But on February 14, 1929, Morin and his associates were betrayed by the police officers who raided their headquarters and gunned them down. Imagine a secret society where members send threatening notes to the wealthy with an imprint of their ink black hand. This is no ordinary gang. They are feared and respected for their ruthlessness and cunning tactics. They frequently clash with the police, and in one particularly aggressive retaliation, many members were shot, arrested, or deported. But this gang is not easily defeated. They change their name to the Chicago Outfits, or the Chicago Family, and shift their focus from kidnappings and extortion to bootlegging and gambling. The scattered groups band together under the guidance of the Godfather, advised by a wise consigliere, and supported by an army of soldiers and associates who bring in money for the gang. They may be deadly, but they also become a global cult with their most notorious and ruthless leader, Al "Scarface" Capone. When Capone takes the reins, he already has a long history of crime. But he leads with an iron fist and a brilliant mind, expanding the gang's reach and power. Imagine a young boy who, at the tender age of 14, left school after hitting a teacher and getting into scraps with various boys' gangs. His reputation grew quickly, and soon he landed a job as the bouncer at a Kenai Island bar owned by the notorious mobster Frankie Yale. It was in this seedy underworld that he earned the gashes on his cheek that gave him the infamous nickname he despised, Scarface. While Al Capone would later brush them off as war scars, in reality, they were from the time he insulted a female patron, something her brother did not take lightly. In 1919, he made the move to Chicago, leaving behind a trail of rumors and whispers. Some say he had murdered a rival gang member and feared retribution. Others believe his mentor, Giovanna Papa, better known as Johnny Torrio, had joined the Chicago Outfits and called him there. It was in Chicago that Al Capone's fortunes began to rise. He was a man who knew the ins and outs of the criminal underworld, with a long list of illicit businesses that brought him around $100 million a year in the 1920s. From gambling to prostitution, from racketeering to bootlegging, he did it all. But to Al Capone, he was more than just a criminal, he was a philanthropist. In his eyes, if people wanted to gamble or drink, he was happy to provide them with what they wanted. His exuberant style and candidness in front of the camera drew public attention, and his supposed generosity only added to his fame. When he appeared in court in 1931, crowds blocked the streets just to catch a glimpse of the kingpin. But beneath the flashy veneer lay a cold-blooded killer, as evidenced by the infamous Valentine's Day Massacre. 7 men were brutally murdered in broad daylight, yet not a single man was ever convicted. The sole witness remained silent, and Al Capone maintained he was completely unaware he was in Miami at the time. One man who knew the truth about Al Capone was Rica. When he fled to the U.S. at the age of 23, he was no stranger to the world of crime. In his native Naples, he had already killed 1 man, maybe at the order of the mafia, maybe because he had broken off his engagement with Rica's sister. He later killed the man whose testimony had sent Rica to jail. Unlike his flashy and volatile companions, Rica was a patient man, always keeping his cool. By the time he met Al Capone, he had worked with several gangs. In their first meeting, he managed to save Scarface's life by alerting him to the presence of rival gang members, even taking a gunshot to his right shoulder in the process. As a later case would show, there is nothing more valuable in the underworld than loyalty. He started as a killer in Naples before immigrating to the United States, where he worked with a variety of gangs until he found himself face to face with Capone. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, the two men quickly became close friends, and Rica was even the best man at Capone's wedding. However, Rica's loyalty to Capone was put to the test in 1943 when he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The gang made sure he was out in just 3 years, but Rica kept his distance from crime after that and was only convicted once for tax evasion. Another member of Capone's outfit was Fredberg, a Sunday school attendee who did well in school but was drawn into a life of crime due to poverty and circumstances. After falling in with a group running a bogus land scheme, he ended up involved in robberies and contract killings and eventually fled to Chicago after murdering 3 men. There, Capone gave him a mission: get rid of Capone's rival Morin. Nitti was more than just Al Capone's right-hand man, he was family. As cousins, they shared an unbreakable bond that went beyond the criminal underworld. But for Nitti, the attraction to a life of crime was only natural. Growing up, he lived close to Al Capone and was surrounded by his cousins' friends from various gangs. But it wasn't just proximity that drew him in. Nitti lacked a stable family and struggled to find his place in the world. His stepfather and sister were at odds, and he bounced from one job to another. The gang offered him a close-knit family system, the thrill of danger, and the promise of wealth. Under Nitti's reign, the gang diversified its operations, branching out from bootlegging in smaller cities to extortion of Hollywood bigwigs. But it was Nitti's downfall that ultimately ended his reign. The FBI informant whose testimony led to his conviction, had sealed his ill-fated end. Willie had a life of twists and turns, marked by a roller coaster of highs and lows. He started as one of Nitti's most trusted allies, a man who worked his way up the ranks of the outfit. The two men shared a strong bond, perhaps forged by their troubled pasts. Willie's father had kicked him out when he was a child, setting him on a path of crime. But he was a flashy criminal with gold business cards and expensive suits, unafraid of the spotlight. However, when Willie was caught, his loyalty quickly crumbled. Facing the prospect of a long prison sentence, he turned informant, betraying the top brass of the outfit. The consequences were dire. Nitti committed suicide, and Willie's friends went to jail. After his release, he fled to Arizona, where he started anew, assuming a new identity and even venturing into the world of casinos. But he could never truly escape his past. The gang never forgets its members, and someone wanted to send a message when Willie's scattered remains were found on the streets near his home. It was a brutal reminder of the price of disloyalty in the underworld.